Long day yesterday. Worked till 9 o'clock last night straight, trying to get my things done around here so I can take off to the mountains. Almost got the poultry barn ready. The baby meat birds, chickens and turkeys are going to be here, I think, the first week of September. And right after the first weekend of September, I'm into the mountains. Anyway, no babbling today, straight to the people. Straight to the people. Now, here's the title of another puzzle piece. Steve, your update titled Sasquatch Hunting Guides and Humiliation contained a letter about how Sasquatch is the keeper of human DNA in order to restart the human race after we destroy ourselves again and again. Presumably, Sasquatch will always be capable of thriving the extinction of the human race, and UFOs will handle the gene splicing necessary to create more humans, based on your previous episodes involving Sabe DNA that may have last happened about 15,000 years ago. The repeated destruction of the human race theory was something that Plato wrote about, while quoting knowledge given to him from Egyptian priests. The priest then added, "This has happened many times." Two more puzzle pieces just fit together. Keep up your much-needed work that provides validation for Bigfoot sighting sufferers. I have no Sabe sightings to relate, but I do keep an eye out while riding my motorcycle around our Olympic Peninsula. I even try my hand at mind speak while in the woods, but apparently I suck at it. Greg. Yeah, you know what, Greg? You know how it's going to happen. It's all of a sudden just going to kick you in the side of the head. Unexpected. And then you're probably going to wish you hadn't, maybe, who knows. And as far as the human race annihilating itself numerous times, I would absolutely believe that at this point of the game, without a doubt. There's too much physical evidence around the globe, right? And but there's never any definitive answers. A few theories. And then what else? For me, as I learn watching the current shit show go on around the planet, as it escalates and gets much worse each generation, it has convinced me the reason being is due to that popular character flaw that humans seem to have been created with, and that is that character flaw of needing absolute control, power, and wealth at all costs. Meaning, that character flaw, if it can't attain what it needs, it'll destroy everything around it, including family, right? And home. It's proven. It's that fact is slapped in our face nonstop. We see it all around us nonstop. And I wonder exactly how many generations it takes to get us to that level where, like I said earlier, what I feel, whatever, I mean, it's your own ride. It's all your own ride. I don't dictate nothing. It's just what I've come up to is, I wonder how many generations of this so-called system it takes to the point of absolute destruction. And I wonder if it is a common number as the human race continues with this real sad character flaw, which just can't seem to get under control and get erased, right? It's a bizarre thing to watch. It's frustrating to watch, sad thing to watch, but it's right there in our face nonstop, watching it. It's really weird. Anyway, babbling. I gotta shut myself off from babbling. But you never know, man. It sure sounds like a reality to me. For sure. The physical evidence around the globe is there. Many civilizations have come and gone before us. Why did they disappear? Why? Now, PA Hotbed, our home. Another update. I really attempted to get it all in one and edited enough you could quickly rip through it. Sorry. The kill room set up when I was a teen was due west. 4 years ago, days after Christmas, I took our daughters and their friends hiking due south. Heavy forest, unlogged for 100 years. Up in the pines, there are 2 stone silos. No one knows who made these, but there are stone rows for thousands of feet. Anyhow, we got to maybe 300 feet shy of the first silo and we found a kill zone / room. It is a fairly steep hill, and there's 3 inches of snow or so. There were 2 deer scattered about, pieces everywhere. Honestly, I didn't look very hard for tracks. Certainly assume it was a bear. I had one beautiful young lady freaking out and a bunch of other scared ones. I told them to just act normal, don't run. We don't need any twisted or busted joints. Head back down the hill and out to the house. We saw, smelled, nor heard anything unusual. I was simultaneously typing this, watching your newest August 4th vid, 2124. What the F? Are you kidding me? When my sister and I heard the woman being, quote, being slaughtered, end quote, for 20 minutes playing pool upstairs in our barn, every single last cell in our bodies said, no effing way were they cougars. Steve, man, you're changing lives here, seriously. We are surrounded by these beings my whole life, and I had no damned idea. How the F am I supposed to not let them keep me out of my woods? Anything I can carry or drag with me, odd six, pistol, grenades, they can squeeze up in the palm of their hands like a gum wrapper and shove it up my ass. I'll try to mind speak or talking out loud, but really do not want to deal with getting involved in their world. I'll revisit this in the morning and maybe add more, send her on out to you. Next morning, I do want to point out we have homeschooled for 11 years. My dad, upon returning home from the war, went into logging along with the farm and sold paperwood for many years. We also have logging in our blood. I went for a drive around the hill last night. Your new info has changed me, scared me. Hopefully with time I will get better. Thanks again, Steve, you kick ass. Okay, and then we had another email from you right here. I don't know if this is first or second. And this will help make sense of the first one we just read, I'm guessing. Found you Sunday, Steve. I haven't been getting much work done. Okay, quick side note on the deer ripped apart. Deer ripped to pieces is typical canine sign. Okay, you guys? I've gone through this list of what predators do with the prey in the past. I'll do it real quickly. Wild dogs or domestic dogs, if they get a hold of a deer or sheep or whatever, they shred it to bits and make a frickin' mess everywhere. Black bears. A black bear will typically drag it into some sort of cover and they'll somewhat try to cover it. I've watched them do it with my own past kill sites. Grizzly bears. A grizzly bear will either eat everything on sight or it will absolutely bury it, like the ground will look rototilled for a large area, depending on how big the kill is. But a grizzly bear will bury it every single time. Wolves will absolutely shred the shit out of it, and there will be pieces all over the place. What do I leave out? Cougars? Cougars will bury it. They'll typically eat the liver, the hearts first, lick out the blood out of the chest cavity, and they will bury it. So there you go. 2 deer scattered. That's canine all the way. Okay? And my phone shut off on me. All right, now, here, let's start this again. This is the second email from the same person. Found you Sunday, and I haven't been getting much work done since. You're just an enigma to us in the club. Wish we were neighbors. We'd be great friends. I watched 9/11 in plain sight, loose change, etc., and it took me a few weeks of shock, but I was now aware. With where this world is headed, on nitrous, I might add, it befuddles my brains watching sheep just glide along with each and every ludicrous thing that is asked of them. Anyhow, I'm 52, had dairy farmed every second of my life when most of this happened. Our character up here in the hills is, well, pretty damn tough. My father was a voluntary Marine in World War II, 8 of his brothers, holy shit, that's a tribe, also enlisted, and 6 were in the war. Trust me when I tell you, those that saw war never speak of it. Those that went to war but didn't see hard action can't talk enough about it. We farmed and cared for animals and land in every environment, 34 below to 100 degrees. Made hay, picked rocks, milked cows twice a day, 365. We were truly blessed and no vacations were needed as our lives were extremely joyous. Hunting was our greatest joy. The guns, the ammo, target shooting, that was like Christmas to us. Uncles, nephews, sisters, we all gathered around for season. My apologies now, I'm no typer or storyteller, but the story of the fellow that lived most of his life thinking frat boys had threw that tree at him touched my soul. It did. I've seen pics of Bigfoot, etc. on TV. Never gave it any worth. I'd never seen a track, manure, anything. All my years in the woods. I know big cats are here, but most never lay eyes on them. I'm attempting to establish, which I really don't have to in this crowd, I guess. I'm extremely confident in my abilities, especially in the woods. Eyes up, head on a swivel, and know what the hell's going on around you the best of your ability. I've lived every day of my life in these hills, professionally and recreationally. Hundreds of thousands of miles on 3- and 4-wheelers and sleds, all within 8 miles radius of our farm. We have lots of whitetail, turkeys, and black and cinnamon bear. Around 2010, I went along to pick blueberries, about 3/4 of a mile from our farm at the eastern edge of a farm we rent. Years prior, my family and I would fill 5-gallon buckets in a hard afternoon. Amazing picking. This year wasn't so great, but I knew I could still get enough for a pie in under an hour. My back was nearly against a very tall, thick brush, mostly multiflora, rose bush, and trees. If you're fortunate to not know what that crap is, thank your lucky stars. The country, promised my grandpa 100 years ago, it was a natural fence. It is garbage, and it has devoured every last inch of northeastern PA that does not get maintained. I'd been picking maybe 8 minutes when behind me, out of nowhere, what sounded like a tree being torn out of the ground, and then a blood-curdling scream, no more than 8 feet behind me at 5 o'clock. The first noise was horrifying enough, but that scream. The only description I can always say is, it was steel, metallic. Its scream was solid, unbreakable, undentable steel, I-beam. It permeated my 300-pound body and went out the front of me. I felt as if its breath probably melted my clothes around my shoulders. I knew whatever I had just pissed off could easily tear me and my Honda ATC to shreds in seconds. I was 5'11", 300 pounds, threw 1,600-pound cattle around my entire life. I screamed as loud as I could, from instinct and fear, not anything else. Without many life-threatening circumstances already in my life, I absolutely would have passed out and soiled myself, zero doubt. To leave, I had to run about 20 feet to my 3-wheeler and turn around and drive directly straight back to where this beast was. I raced back up the hill, made it home with my life, and I saw nothing. I didn't think there was a tree there, a fraction as big as the noise it made. To this very day, I've not been back. I'm not proud of that. I'm ashamed of that. I'd ridden that exact trail and picked berries there 50 hours of my life prior. Zero sound, zero noises, zero smell, no grunts, warnings, knocks, or sixth sense. Nothing. I must have been sitting there when I arrived. It must have been sitting there when I arrived. I have electric running through me now typing this. It was not of this world. So, 100 feet from where I was picking, my neighbor told me a month later this camp owner was paying a local to feed the bear daily. I knew of the feeder, but had no worry picking during daylight. They had paths mowed through the property with a lawnmower. My friend's farm bordered this pasture. His home was easily within screaming distance, maybe 1,000 feet. Upon my friend telling me what he did next, everything started to make sense. He said this neighbor had brought down pics from his feeding cameras. My friend said, "Are you a special kind of stupid, aren't you?" He had up to 7 and 8 bears feeding there, sometimes together. Some big bastards too. My instincts told me no bear could have a billionth the horsepower as the monstrosity that shook me to the marrow of my bones, but it fit together perfectly. It must have been a 600-pounder that was literally a few inches from me. I spent a few more weeks trying my best to convince myself that a bear could make a tenth of the noise as what I was just subjected to. Then I spoke to my friend again. He is a loner in every sense of the word. Like me, farmed here his entire life and rode hundreds of thousands of miles through these hills. He has countless firearms and over 100,000 rounds in his home. Yes, he said he swore he was never, ever going to tell a living soul about this. The year prior, he'd shot a doe the second evening of the season. He shot it out the back of his garage, less than 80 yards from his home, and about exactly 80 to 100 yards from my encounter. He had went out to get the deer and bring it in. He said he had his rifle with him and a sidearm strapped to his side as always. He bent over to pick her up and was greeted with the exact life-stopping roar. He guessed maybe 40 feet behind him. He described as this: they always used AI to breed their herd. We always used a bull. One of our better bulls we kept far, far past where we should have, and he was 2,400 pounds. Built his pen from one side to the other, too tall to get under our pipeline. A majestic, perfect beast. Solid, gleaming black, and 110% all muscle. We tried to get rid of them by 1,600 pounds as the testosterone has usually turned them into 100% psychotic killers by then. You can't safely go in the pasture and are always on full alert. Anyhow, he said his only human description of this thing was, whatever it was, could effortlessly tear that bull into shreds, pick him up, snap his spine, and have its way with him in seconds. I agreed. He also keeps a huge pup dog around. His dog regularly goes apeshit scared. He always assumed it was the coyotes. We hear them every night. A little backstory. The government will happily tell you we don't have big cats here, only bobs. That's a bobcat. We do. A few years prior, my cousin lost 2 beefers, separate incidences. 1,000-pound cows. The cows went into a creek in the woods to drink, and the assumption was something was dropping out of a tree, breaking/killing them by the neck. Uh-oh. Big cats don't do that. There were a lot of puma sightings that summer, and we thought it was the cat. This is maybe 800 yards downstream from our experiences. Who knows? I do not. Our son swears he saw a Bigfoot around 2000 back in the hills along a dirt road. His wife swears she saw one cross our pasture at our farm in 2012. My niece had to stop and wait for one to cross in front of her at a round top. Athens, PA. She was going north on 220, and a blonde/sand-colored one around 8 feet tall crossed the highway. She and many other vehicles had to stop and wait for it to cross. This was far from a glimpse. They all watched this being cross 4 lanes and a field to disappear up into the hills of a round top. A solid 30-plus second sighting, 0 doubt. Locals around there say, yes, you need to keep your stuff locked down. Quick side note on the killing thing. So if anything breaks the neck of a cow, steer, domestic beef, it's not a cougar, okay? A cat kills typically by a bite to the head, chomp. I have a big old ancient old age cat that I had to whack years ago, and he actually had the puncture hole in his head with the tip of a tooth from a larger, possibly a larger male cougar. With the tip of the tooth was still in that hole in his skull. And my veterinarian friend said that that was the signature of a large cat trying to kill him, and that cat was very, very lucky that he survived that. But that's how big cats kill. Chomp on the top through the skull, or they just grab around the windpipe and suffocate him. It's game over. But they definitely do not break the necks of domestic beef. Not a chance. Side note, and my phone timed out. All right, the best for last. After my dad's funeral, my sister and family were home. We're going spotlighting later this night. It was around November 28th. Had to be dark. It had been dark since 4:30ish and was probably 7:30 p.m. We're all gathered around the supper table talking. My sister went out to their car to get something. Our daughters were very young at the time. Upon coming back in, I saw that she looked like death, almost green. My father had passed a week earlier in her home, and he looked better than she did at this point. She sat down at the chair she had been in. I said quietly, "What?" She shook her head violently no, unable to speak or breathe even. After we dispersed and the kids went to play, she reported that while she was out to the car, something screamed at her, violently. She was speechless, that we hadn't heard it and felt it in the house. She said it shook the entire hill. She had never believed in Bigfoot, but she said without any doubt whatsoever, there damn sure is one outside her home on this hill. She and I went in the barn late one night and heard cougars making a racket above the house years prior. It sounded like 3 women being slaughtered for 20 minutes. We ran from the barn to the house. This scream shook her a billion times worse. My daughters also experienced the same scream one night unloading groceries. I was not there, and they were young. At the time I blew it off, but I have little doubt now what they heard. Health issues have since riddled our family. I don't get to spend hardly any time up in the woods. I look forward to getting back out there with the newfound knowledge you and your crew have brought forward. As I type this, for the third straight night, the owls are hooting, echoing all around the hill. I've seen an owl nest where the noises are coming from, but it is still pretty unnerving. God bless each and every one of you. Remember, all it takes for bad people to get their way is for good people to say nothing. We need to take our countries back, and talking/asking is not going to be the way. One last thing, I've held this overnight from sending to edit because I know I'm the king of run-on sentences. I tried to edit the best I could for you. When I was 15, we have a waterfall on our property. Yes, so dang blessed and thankful. It is where my dad always chose to hunt. All he could see was thick brush. We never ever understood it. I realize now it was never about killing a deer. We had a freezer full of beef and didn't care for venison. It was about relaxing, a change in pace. Anyhow, around the mid-'80s, there was a kill spot there. It was a 30-foot circle. Every tree was scraped up much higher than we could reach. The leaves, the rocks, everything were gone in this circle. Bare freaking dirt like a rug. They were damn proud of this spot. There were 1 or 2 deer carcasses in it. We always said it was a bear. My brother-in-law was a retired airborne ranger, lived/hunted/guided in Alaska, and we had run across these tree markings in the 90s, and he said it was a black bear. He never saw this kill chamber. I just assumed from what Dad said, and in the future seeing pines tore up from bear, that was what it was. I definitely do not think so now. Again, every hair on my body standing up. This was very, very definite sign. This is ours, stay the F away. My dad is afraid of absolutely nothing. He grew up in a farm family of 16. They got 1 pair of shoes for Christmas on the good years. He traipsed around these hills delivering a weekend newspaper for 5 cents a weekend when he was young. 8 and 10-foot drifts, all after doing chores. As a Marine in World War II, he had to shield himself with the bodies of his fallen comrades storming Normandy Beach. He is afraid of absolutely nothing. That is my story. No need to share my name. I'm giving you my name and number. If you ever need me to try and help you or anyone else, please call. Thank you again for what you're doing, and watch your back. You never know when some government assholes decide they don't like what you're doing. No need to read that part aloud. Thanks, Steve. Update 2. As I was editing this, I was texting my sister, an Asian lady, and her 2 kids just saw another Sasquatch exactly where my niece saw it years ago. This poor lady is locked in her home for 2 weeks now, and will not leave her home without her husband. Completely horrified. Greens Landing, PA. And there you go. Some more people uneducated on the topic now have that sentence of being terrified, not wanting to go outside because it probably shook them to the frickin' core. Right? Why did it do that? Because they were absolutely not prepared for what they were going to see. As usual. And then the multiple groups sighting that you talked about, where numerous people saw that thing cross the highway and the field. I remember when I was a young teenager in Victoria, British Columbia, Vancouver Island, the local Vancouver City News, which is a major global, it wasn't global news then, I think it was, I don't know what the hell it was. It was the major news network at the time. They even had, I remember they had cameras there on the highway, which is the Sea to Sky Highway, where I have taken all of you numerous times in the mountains above, where I found prints, etc. Now the highway between Vancouver and it was the highway between Squamish and Whistler. There was apparently dozens of eyewitnesses watched this thing cross the highway and go straight up a great big rock slide, and they watched it climb for over 500 yards in broad daylight. All the traffic was pulled over, and it was caused enough attention and phone calls that the news went out there to report on it. Of course, they were smirking and making jokes while they were reporting on it, but that was the report. I'll never forget seeing that on the news. I was kind of like, what? Holy shit. And that was before I had that one watching me too. Anyway, thanks for that email, man. And if you can, I don't know if you could, but taking a photo, going back and taking a photo of one of these kill chamber, you called it, or kill sites, I would be interested in seeing that. And then if I could, then I could also see if it was something that was obvious or familiar to me or not. And I know in Pennsylvania all I have is black bears for predators. Guaranteed there's big cats. We already know there is. And the wildlife department will not acknowledge that, because apparently if they do, then they lose out on grant money and a bunch of other shit. Another reason why the knowledge only comes from the people, right? But anyway, I'd like to see that, if you could somehow get a photograph of it and send it to me, and I'll let you know how I feel about it, what I'm recognizing or not. Holy, this one is a magazine. What if I can do this? Whew. Holy, this is a long one. This might be one of the longest ever. I'm gonna go for it. Did I just mark this as red? Or was it red? Uh-oh. No, I didn't. All right, here we go. Get ready. My Saturday experiences. My first experience, California Sequoia National Forest in July 2008. At this time, I was clueless to the reality of Sasquatch. Clueless. I thought it was a ridiculous myth. People had too much time on their hands if they were investigating these things, I thought. My husband, daughter, and I were on a vacation, celebrating the last vacation opportunity with my youngest daughter before she headed off to college in the fall. We were taking a 2-mile hike to the hollowed-out log home on the Muir Trail. About halfway down into the forest, we saw a bizarre 40-foot-tall, pitch-black, teepee-like structure at the edge of the paved walkway, bordering the edge of a swampy area. Other tourists were taking pictures of it. I had never seen anything like it. My immediate reaction was of revulsion. "What is that thing?" I said to my family. "Who would build such a demonic-looking thing? That's demonic." I estimate its base to be about 16 feet in diameter. It was so out of place in such a lovely natural environment. We continued our trek, but soon it became clear that we had planned poorly. It was getting dark, colder, and we were unprepared. Every sense of discernment and common sense I had was telling me, turn back, go back to your car now. After arguing with my family about the dangers of being out in the wilderness in tank tops, no phone reception, no food or water, etc., my perturbed family rolled their eyes at me, but reluctantly agreed. We turned around and began the long ascent back up into the parking lot, maneuvering the switchbacks. We're not seeing any more hikers, and soon we were talking about lighting up our phones to see the trail. Then a small pebble hit my shoe, then another one hit my pant leg. I cried out in pain. Looking behind me, I saw nothing. Brushed it off and continued on. Then my husband got hit in the leg. I said, "Who would do that? What animal in the woods throws stones at people?" We looked back and I yelled out, "Hey, stop it!" We concluded it must be kids hiding in the trees because we heard voices laughing, giggling, and language. Then someone started hitting a tree trunk. We were absolutely clueless as to what we were up against. Now I look back and shudder to think of the many lost souls who have come up missing in that place. It was almost dark, so instead of taking the lengthy switchbacks, we climbed vertically back up the hill, finally making it to our vehicle. We were leaving the park cold and rattled at 9:30 p.m. Dark as the ace of spades. Way too late. Stupid. We continued on our vacation, moved on with our lives, and forgot about it. It wasn't until years later when I saw your channel, Steve, and got educated on the reality of Bigfoot that I realized what happened that day. That structure was Sasquatch made, and they were chasing us out of the forest that night, I'm sure of it. It wasn't until years later I had my second encounter. Finger Lakes region in upstate New York, USA, 2017. I was resisting peacefully in my bed midsummer. I enjoy sleeping with the window open as often as I can. Being near nature is something I love to the deepest parts of my soul. The next few minutes would change my life and my view of the world forever. At approximately 1:30 a.m., I was literally drugged out of my peaceful sleep to the most fear-inducing scream/roar/guttural groan I've ever heard in my life. I sat straight up in bed, one hand to my heart, one arm curled around my head to attempt to stop the sound from permeating my person. I jumped up to the window, but was so physically incapacitated, I collapsed back on my bed, my heart pounding. Full awake, I knew I wasn't dreaming. Shaking, I called out to my husband, but could not wake him. He did not move, did not respond to my cries. He slept through it all. That's a common one too. That's really weird. My heart was pounding so hard, I was calling on the Lord for protection and to help me get control of my body. Responses to such fear that I'd never known in my life. I was able to settle down after praying and get my head in gear. I went to the window and could see nothing. The sound was coming from the end of our driveway near the woods, about 50 feet from my bedroom window. All the action was at the end of the garage, not visible from my vantage point. So, I never saw it was making all that noise. After about 15 seconds, it let out another roar. I came to the conclusion that two creatures were fighting outside our house. I had put out food scraps in the woods at the edge of the driveway. I figured they were fighting over that. But whatever it was, one of them, another large animal, became the loser and was screaming out in pain, whining in agony. I could hear the loser running in the gravel down the driveway. I'll try to explain to you the description of the sound that practically knocked me over. Honestly, it sounded like a mix of a grater scraping a blade across asphalt or pushing gravel. Imagine that sound octaves below what would be normal for that sound in our ears. Then couple it with amplified screams, evil guttural growls, even hissing, chest puffing with huge billowing lungs. Again, all very guttural. Amplify that like a speaker cranked up to rock concert style volume. That's the best I can tell it. There really aren't words to adequately describe that horrific sound or the pressure it produced in my body. The entire encounter lasted about 30 to 45 seconds. It would blast a roar, then huff and puff a while, then do it again. Those were the seconds that changed my attitude and perspective of my property forever. I literally crawled to my bed, so shaken I could not stand. My husband's still asleep. I somehow managed to fall asleep myself. I woke to a lovely morning, birds singing, and then the memory of the night before stung me again and demanded an answer. What was that? But I had no answer. I lay there stunned, but thinking rationally now. I determined not to let the experiences be overwhelming to me anymore. I prayed against a spirit of fear. I let it go and moved on in my life, chalking it up to as two bears fighting over the food in my driveway. Later, I checked outside. I saw absolutely nothing to relate as evidence of something happening on my property the night before, other than scraps were mostly gone. Throughout all these two experiences, I was clueless that I'd encountered Sasquatch. Clueless. I didn't believe they existed. I'm a pretty stable person, both feet on the ground type of woman, and I wasn't born yesterday. I had two very traumatic, gut-wrenching personal experiences that year outside of these. I have to say that Bigfoot experience was the icing on the cake, as they say. I suffered, believing I must be losing it. I was very, very upset, confused, rattled, and undone by this experience. I repeatedly asked God for clarity, discernment, wisdom, peace, and to make sense of it. My husband did not believe me. It wasn't until God showed me your channel, Steve, and I meant it. He led me to you. That I was able to find peace in knowing that I wasn't losing it. I know what I heard and others had heard it too. You and the kind people who submit their similar stories helped me find the clarity, discernment, wisdom, and peace to make sense of it. Thank you, and God bless you and your listeners for helping me. I hope I can, in turn, help others as well. Since that time, I've heard the roar over 4 times around our area. It didn't end here for me. It got wilder from this point on. Ouch. Experience number 3, North Texas, 2018. My husband and I also own a home in North Texas on a lake. It's a cute little vacation home in a very remote wooded mountain area on a cliff overlooking the beautiful water below. We have a daughter nearby, my son-in-law, and 2 cute grandkids that we love very much. My high school best friend, Shirley, and her husband, Dan, came to visit. They were the kind of people you can pour out your most complex thoughts to be heard by them and given credence, and we could learn from them. Our friendship was sweet. We were enjoying a quiet evening around the table sharing stories. I related my experience encountering a mountain lion while sitting on my back patio. Thanks be to God, I was able to spook it, and it bounded down the cliff behind her house. Another story, another day. The subject of Bigfoot came up, and I laughed. He said, "Do you have Bigfoot around here?" And I laughed again. I was perturbed because I thought he was making fun of me. I didn't believe any respectable person would believe such a thing as the existence of Sasquatch, and he said, "I'm not joking." My girlfriend backed him up by saying he and his family have had many encounters where he grew up in southern Michigan. Dan began to relate to me his many stories and the profound effect it had on his mother. Still clueless as to relating this to my own past experiences, I was somewhat disturbed by it all. But now I realized it was my red pill wake-up call to realize that Sasquatch was part of our reality, fiction no more. Subsequent visits to Texas later on proved that we indeed have Bigfoot in the great state of Texas. We contend with mountain lion, snakes, scorpions, wild pig, wild dog, and tarantulas. I pack heat when I go outside to work in my garden. And now, them. I've had rocks thrown out the side of the house while in my bed reading. And finally, my husband witnessed an encounter while we were sitting outside on our deck enjoying the sunset. 2 25-foot trees down the cliff near the water began simultaneously shaking about 100 feet away. Sounded like coons or a cat in the trees hissing back. My husband said, "We're going in the house." So much for that pleasant evening. My husband and I heard overly amplified owl hoots just outside our bedroom window. At that time, we had no idea this is commonly reported as Sasquatch behavior. Later that month, the most god-awful stench drove me out of my bedroom. Nothing, and I mean nothing I've ever smelled stank like that. Not a skunk. Didn't know what it was then, but now, awake, Sabai is certainly at the top of the list of suspects. I've also encountered their weird language, whispers, and even mind speak. The mind speak was the worst. I heard this voice in my head say, "Come closer to the window. We want to see you without the coverings. You have no hair." Discerning evil, I said to them, "I rebuke you in the name of the Creator Jesus Christ. Don't ever speak to me again in my head or anywhere else. Go back to hell where you belong. I belong to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and the blood of Jeshua is upon me. You cannot have me. Get out." Now they could see me on the 3rd floor. I have no idea because there is only a cliff that drops off behind our house. But I haven't seen anything or heard anything since, thank God. No longer thick as mud, no longer hesitating and living in denial, I began to realize that my friends Dan and Shirley were in possession of knowledge I needed to learn. And that's when I started watching your podcast in earnest. Ignorance is not bliss. Next encounter, back in upstate New York, 2018. I love my home in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. We built it, cherished it, and enjoy taking care of our property. I was hanging clothes on my clothesline that my husband put up for me on my 2nd-story deck. I heard a rustle in the leaves at the wood's edge near my husband's burn pile. I looked down to see what was making the noise. Approximately 25 feet away stood a hairy man. No more than 6 feet tall with reddish-brown hair all over, shaggy. I turned around and immediately went in the house. Then I got mad. What the hell is some guy in a ghillie suit doing trespassing on our property? And it's not hunting season. He's stalking me. Made me mad. I went back out to confront him/it, and it was leaning on the tree. His one foot was crossed over his other foot, his toe stuck in the dirt. A rather relaxed pose for someone who doesn't own the place. I looked at it, and it smiled. That was my first clue that I wasn't looking at a man. He had way too many teeth. It looked over its shoulder behind itself and leaned back to look and laugh with the voice behind it. They were audibly laughing, and they were laughing at me. I looked at it, turned my palms up to say, "What the hell?" I opened my mouth to speak, to ask them, "What are you doing here?" But at that same time, a gust of wind blew the sheet from the line to my face, covering my view. When I jerked the sheet back to see them, they were gone in a millisecond. Nothing there. Whatever they found amusing is beyond me. My husband often permits our closest friends to hunt on our property. They are most welcome to do so, and they always let me know when they are there as per our request. After contacting them all and our neighbors, not one even owns a ghillie suit or knows anybody who would have been out there in May. I saw no bow or firearm on this thing, just hair and creepy teeth. Had way too many teeth for a human. It took me a while to understand what I saw and heard. Again, you, Steve, and your contributors on your show were part of my education of what was going on in our world. But I still do not fully believe. I just thought Bigfoot were somewhere else, not on my property. My act of denial was quickly faded. Later that year, I was on my property enjoying July berry season. We have tons of wild berries, absolute delicious fruits that I love picking. I look forward to it as a highlight of my summer. I know there are bear on our property, black and brown. I've seen them, smelled and heard them. Tracks were always visible on our trails at this time of year. Bears, deer, turkeys, and birds feed on the berries too. When I take my trails to the wild berry patches, I take mace, tick spray, a big cowbell, and a pistol with me. I figured I was armed up, ready for any encounter. I wasn't, but I thought so at the time. After a long walk to the end of our property, I was pleasantly working my way back to the house. If I heard a rustle in the bush, I would ring the cowbell, hopefully driving away any bigger wildlife. I was very aware of the plentiful coyote and the bear. Still not totally figuring on Sasquatch into the equation. I heard again rustling, and so I rang the bell. In response, I heard a deep guttural growl, then movement, and a red, hair-covered head come up over the brush, which was at least 8 feet tall. Still, at that time, I could not compute what I was seeing. Also, my vision isn't that great. I couldn't really focus on details. My brain told me I was seeing a standing bear and its cub. I knew my berry picking was over. I rang the bell again, and the thing dropped to all fours with a thud that was way too loud. Disconcerted, I walked back to the house, safely, thank God. But I knew that bear on its hind legs was way too tall, and the hair was way too long and too red-colored for a bear. I just couldn't explain it. I had no other reference at that time for understanding. I was looking at two sabe. The cub I saw through the brush was probably a juvenile. I haven't been able to go berry picking again. Also, now most of the berries and wild apples we used to pick in September are gone, all gone, and we know who ate those. Moving right along, my next two encounters in one day east of Holland, Michigan, summer 2019. One of my sisters lives with a beautiful family in Michigan, bordering a wildlife preserve. I was in Michigan and always feel like it's home to me, still. But after this day, I would hesitate to say it still felt the same. I drove from New York to attend my nephew's graduation party, hosted on my sister's property. It was always a great time for family. I always enjoyed my visits. During the party, I noticed their neighbor across the street was agitated and upset. I knew him and was surprised to see him so angry and frustrated. Another neighbor approached him and said, "Is everything okay?" I went closer to see if I could help in any way, and I overheard, "That thing is out there again." He lifted his hand and pointed out to the corner of the field. There stood a creature that only computed in my brain as I saw it as a guy in a gorilla suit. He was slopping around in a marshy area, peeking up behind a tree, then coming out again and standing there looking at us with a creepy smile on his face. The thing was huge. We viewed it at the timberline, probably 200 yards away across a wheat field. It had black/gray fur and a conical head. My feeling was it seemed to take pleasure in tormenting the neighbor across the street. It kept looking back at something and communicating with something or someone or something else behind itself. Then turned around a tree trunk and disappeared into the woods. I turned away, back to the party, and shook my head, but said nothing. Dumb as a post. I look back now and can't believe how thick I was, not being willing to adjust to the reality of what I saw. I saw it. I still couldn't compute it. Even after everything I had experienced before, I blocked it out. Later that day, I heard a rifle fire from the back of that neighbor's house. Frankly, I hope he got the thing. I noticed that this neighbor man had a beautiful garden. He had electric fencing all around it. It had all been torn up the night before. Putting two and two together equals Sasquatch. They had tormented that good man. I am concerned for my sister and her family in that place. They are all often in my prayers. Later the next year, I worked up enough courage to warn my brother-in-law of Bigfoot presence on their property. I cautioned him and encouraged him to talk to his neighbor to see what he has seen. He was just looking at me and said, "Okay." So I was still alone in my experiences. I looked forward to speaking to the neighbor again myself. Later that night, I would have my worst Bigfoot encounter. I enjoyed the rest of the day and actually forgot about the gorilla guy and just went on with the fun. Late in the afternoon, I said my goodbye with dozens of hugs and kisses and began my journey. With happiness, back to my mother's home in Indiana to visit her. I checked my directions and decided I didn't need my GPS because I knew the way to the expressway a few miles away. However, I missed my turn. I knew Michigan's country roads were generally laid out in 1 mile grids, so it was a matter of deduction to just go another mile and I would find a right turn to catch the next entrance to the expressway. Well, not all roads end up where you think they're going to. So I realized I was not headed in the right direction. The winding road was not well traveled, and I had lost my bearings. Debris was all over the roadway. Clearly, no one frequented this road much. And suddenly it was night. I flipped on my headlights to bright beams, and it just couldn't cut the darkness. I was driving very slowly. I could barely see in front of me. I knew I'd been on this road before. I just couldn't figure it out. It would have been simple just to turn around and go back, but I couldn't find anywhere to turn the car around. So I moved slowly forward again. My body began to react to something. I suddenly was so fatigued, I just wanted to stop the car and go to sleep. I seriously considered it. I was unable to function normally. I felt like everything was in slow motion. I had myself together enough to know this wasn't good, and it wasn't in my nature to feel this way. I then got my husband on the phone, said his name, and he knew something was wrong with me immediately. I had my foot on the brake in the middle of the road, just sitting there, trying to figure out what the hell was going on with me. Why was it so dark? Why was I in a brain fog? Why was I shaking? Why couldn't I see the damn map? Why couldn't I find a flashlight? "I need help with directions," I said. Larry always uses 2 to 3 GPS devices, and he was on it for me. I told him, "Larry, something's very wrong here. I just can't think, and I don't have enough light to check the map. Could you please say a prayer? I'm in a bad way." Excuse me. While I was rummaging around trying to find a flashlight and get glasses on, something hit the driver's side of my Jeep. I said to Larry, "What was that? What was that?" It was as if a wet shag rug got thrown over the full length of the side of my car. It flopped over the roof, part of the back hatch window, and half of the windshield. I looked left out my driver's window to see my rearview mirror obliterated with reddish hair. My dash lights and dome light were on to illuminate my search for the flashlight, but instead illuminated a chest pressed against my driver's side window. Inches away, I see this yellowish, leathery skin pressed against my window. Abs were visible and a sternum. I could barely speak. Larry could sense how stressed I was. I identified 2 nipples as part of the chest, surrounded by long, stringing red hair. It was clearly male. What I now know was a Sasquatch had literally enveloped over the driver's half of my car, arms on top. I think it had a hold in the luggage rack, chest and torso. Thank God I didn't have to see that. Were plastered along the driver's door. I think the legs and feet may have been on the underside of the Jeep. In my distress, I called on the Lord. A gentle voice spoke to me, and I recognized it as good, and I believed it was my guardian angel in response to our prayer for need of help. The voice firmly said to me, "Put your foot on the gas pedal, Liana." It was all I could do to move my leg and foot. I just couldn't move. I prayed again for strength and courage. I came against a spirit of fear. With great difficulty, I managed to get my foot on the gas pedal. The good voice said, even more firmly and urgently, "Go, Leanna. Push down on the pedal now. Push it down and go now." I literally had to look at the gas pedal to will my foot to push it down. Why, I do not know. Finally, the car began to move. However, the back left tire began to spin, no traction. I put the pedal to the metal, the car dropped, I got traction. The rug thing slipped off the car. I was thinking more clarity now, turned off the dome lights and dimmed the dash lights, and was able to think and see better almost immediately. As I progressed along the road, I could breathe again. I knew my husband was still on the phone, and I could hear that big tough guy quietly praying for me. That comforted me. I knew I'd be okay. I could see home lights around the roadside, and the sky was lighter. It wasn't night yet, even though I was in the darkness at this encounter. I was finally able to speak to Larry. "What just happened here, Larry? I don't know what just happened to me." The farther I drove, the more I recovered. I felt like myself again. It began to rain. I was so glad it was going to wash off all this smeary gunk left on my car windows by that thing. My husband talked me all the way back to my 86-year-old mother's home. I knew I needed to get it together to help her. I certainly couldn't tell her what had just occurred. I really didn't know what had happened at that point. I internalized most of this experience for a long time. I just knew I had encountered something evil, and not for the first time. Upon much reflection, and with the subsequent knowledge gained from you, Steve, and your kind listeners, I have come to two possible conclusions. I would be interested in your opinion, and everyone else, about this encounter. I wonder if this Sasquatch is part of a Bigfoot entourage that showed up across the road at my sister's party and it followed me. I was about 4 miles from my sister's house when this happened. Perhaps it was pursuing me, wishing me harm, I wonder. How many times do you encounter two different Bigfoot in two different locations on the same day? That's insane. Crazy stuff. I wonder if a different Sasquatch randomly accidentally intersected with my car. I believe there was a wall or a bank of dirt to my left that perhaps it slid down the hill and accidentally fell on top of or under my car. Has anyone had a Sasquatch wrap itself over your car like that? Also, I'm quite sure, as I slowly moved the car, I ran over its leg and or foot, and that was the reason I couldn't accelerate, because it was lifting the back end of my car up its foot. Or, was it ready to flip my car? I think it was certainly big enough to do so. To envelope my Jeep Cherokee like that. I would say it was at least 8 feet tall to wrap around my car, under and over it. And strong enough to lift up the back end of my car and drop it. Crazy stuff. I've heard of other people say they try and flip cars or have been successful in flipping them. Jeez. I may be able to claim the prize for the closest Bigfoot counter yet. 3 inches. Dear God. Thankfully, I never got a look at his face. In the morning of the next day, I left my mom's place to make the drive home to New York. While loading my luggage in my car, I walked around to see if there was any damage, and thankfully the car was intact and clean. But when I closed the hatch, something flew in my face. I batted it away, but I realized it was long, wiry hair. Half of it, at the root, was gray, and the other half was auburn red, over 18 inches long. Guess where that came from? It was firmly attached to the passenger side of the back of the car, hooked on the back passenger side luggage rack. I threw it away. I'm not crazy, I'm not a liar. I swear to you, by God, this is true. I really am too old to care what people think about me anymore. I just know what I've seen. My eternal thanks to you and your listeners' contributions, later filling in my puzzle pieces. I never wanted to see these things, never wanted any encounters, period. But more were to follow whether I liked it or not. Holy shit. Here's another title, same email, On the Road, Sasquatch Encounters USA 2020. I spent the last several months listening to you, Steve, almost daily at Facts to Howtohunt YouTube. I've been able to learn so much, and I thank you. Also, I've been following the Q drop since early 2018. I'm a passionate American patriot. I am also very proud of my Canadian neighbors for standing against the deep state. Way to go, guys. I'm awestruck as to the validity, truthfulness, foresight, and vision these warriors from the AQ team possess. I'm equally grateful for the education they have given me about our world. It has been a difficult journey to realize that our world isn't what we have thought. I've been educating myself about not just Bigfoot, but the consequences of globalist government leaders taking us hell-bent toward the New World Order. And happily, the white hats that have been working to free us for many decades are finding success to free we the people from this evil tyranny. We have a way to go, but much of the battle has been won. In my last few emails to you, I've admitted how thick and dumb as a post I was about the reality of Sasquatch. I was simply living in denial of what was right in front of my eyes. I couldn't see those Sasquatch, even though they were right in front of me. I couldn't see those corrupt politicians either. I voted for them. I sent the money. I just couldn't get it. But I'm a little kinder to myself these days. I've learned how difficult it is for human beings to get red-pilled, to wrap their mind around some of the most horrific truths we all have never seen. Furthermore, I believe God has kept some of these horrors from us until now. Now is the time to awaken. Now is the time to take action. Now is the time to embrace Him and His help. We need His supernatural power to understand our world and fight the evil that's permeating it. Much of what I've learned from the Q movement, Great Awakening, and what I've learned from you and your channel about the Sabe, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, it all merges. It's all tied together. I can see much clearer now than ever before in my life. I've devoted countless hours of research seeking to understand the real truths about our world. I don't believe it is a mistake that I've awakened to the existence of the Sasquatch at the same time. Shocking, eye-opening details of the tyranny surrounding us on all fronts, including this mystery of the Sasquatch, Dogman, Skinwalkers, etc. I'd like to share my knowledge with you later, if I may, as it pertains to your channel and Sasquatch. Now my head is constantly on a swivel. I can spot Sasquatch sign a mile away. Thank you for your part in enlightening me. Having said that, I think it would be of interest to you and your listeners to hear from someone who travels extensively. I've already shared with you and your audience several of my Sabe encounters from California, Michigan, New York, and Texas. My husband drives a semi-truck, mainly delivering food and water across the U.S. He invites me to ride along once in a while. Not my favorite mode of travel, but it's cheaper than airfare, and we get some time together. We've seen many states, even through and in spite of COVID lockdowns. Now that I'm aware, awake, and more intuitive, I'm seeing and discerning stuff everywhere. Do I want to see Sasquatch? No. Never asked to, don't want to, yet I see them. One trip on the truck, we were completely stopped in traffic on a Pennsylvania state highway for an accident ahead of us. I was just looking out the window peacefully, minding my own business. I glanced to my right at the fence line, just at the roadside, enjoying some pretty flowers along the wire fence, when my eyes saw a face in the weeds at the fence. I stared at this pasty-colored, sleepy-looking, moon-shaped face that possessed a gaunt, absent expression. The mouth corners were drawn way down in a very sad effect, and it was quite pathetic. I said out loud, "Oh Lord." Just then it raised its eyes and looked straight at me. Suddenly the eyes got wide with fear. The creature stood up from its haunches. It had long, thin, stringy gray hair, sparsely distributed across its entire body. It looked sickly, dirty, and old. The hair was so thin across all of its body, everywhere, you could see mottled gray skin under the 8 to 12-inch long hair strands. Its head was completely bald, from the middle of the top of the head forward. Longer hair, appearing much thicker, resumed on the back of its head, down the back. Thicker, dark hair under its chin, neck, and chest. Thankfully, its groin area was also there. Its legs were extremely wide set at the hips, so it ran away from the fence area with a very strange and awkward gait. It had big, hairy feet and stood only about 6 feet tall. However, he had wide shoulders for a rather smallish frame. It only took about 4 strides for this thing to get across a small barnyard, step over a fence, and disappear from my view. Before he made it across a small barnyard into the tree line, he turned to look at me again, straight in the eyes. He was terrified of me. I was sitting in the truck cab with my window down, gobsmacked at what I was looking at again. Another Bigfoot creature. I don't know if any other vehicles that were sitting there saw it, but the thing kept looking at me. It was weird. But by this time in my Bigfoot journey, I was certain that the name of the Creator, God, Lord Jesus, has an impact on them big time. I've found it is an effective deterrent. This Bigfoot was unlike any other Bigfoot I'd encountered so far. Smaller, not covered completely with hair, balding, human-like skin on its dirty face, but bizarre nonetheless and not human. The other Bigfoot encounters I've had only produced disgust in me, but this one was so pathetic looking I couldn't help but feel sorry for it. One feature of this Bigfoot was the greatest mystery to me. Its waist looked like it had a belt on it. A shiny, somewhat illuminated blue... No way. The shiny, somewhat illuminated blue buckle seemed to be on the front. I repeat, this was not a human person. Could be a tracking device? Do any of your listeners know how, if special forces tag these things? I seem to recall someone from the military writing to you about that, Steve. I have no other explanation as to why a Bigfoot would wear a belt. He was naked. No pants to hold it up. I can't explain it. Side note, I read a report from a scientist who's seen the same thing, and it was an email to another scientist. I don't even remember how many years ago that was. And he said to his colleague that he wished he hadn't seen what he saw, but he saw this thing with a bright blue belt on its waist. I remember reading that. How odd is that? Anyway, also I can't help focusing on its stance at the roadside fence. That 6-foot creature folded itself down to a squat so it was lower than the 4-foot wire fence. How did they do that? Its hands were holding onto the fence at its eye level, peering through a hole in the fence. It had long, dirty fingernails. How weird is that? Every time I encounter these creatures, I immediately evoke the name of the Lord, God, Creator, Jesus Christ. And the Sasquatch are terrified. It was when I began to pray out loud when I first saw the creature that it made eye contact with me and was afraid. They know that name. They know those who are God's creation. Don't doubt it. Throughout our travels, I've seen skinny swaying Sasquatch on a mountaintop in downstate New York. Yet another unbelievably tall, ugly monster-like face, clearly a Bigfoot, peeking out behind a roadside tree in Pennsylvania. Like wrapped around the back of a large tree, watching traffic. Its one eye looked like it was gone. We made eye contact and the thing was afraid of me. It turned around. I've seen what I thought was a huge rotting tree stump along the roadside. I only noticed it because it was red and huge, like a California redwood stump, but this was in Ohio. I spent part of my childhood there. I knew a redwood shouldn't be there. Then I witnessed the stump wasn't a stump. This massive sabe began to twist itself, stand up from its haunches, turn its head back to give me an evil smirk, then stomped off. The whole encounter wasn't less than 10 seconds, but it happened. I can travel almost anywhere in this country and observe Sasquatch behavioral and structural sign. Let me just say again, I am not looking for my own show. I don't want to see these things. I don't want to hunt them. I didn't ask to hear or smell them. I don't want this. I'm not obsessed with Bigfoot and just saying, I usually don't evoke fear in the humans I encounter, lol. To a discerning person, it is evident they exist almost everywhere we travel. Most troubling are the Sasquatch sign I observed bordering suburban neighborhoods, i.e. snapped off tree limbs, X shapes, trees laterally positioned across other high tree limbs, teepees, etc. I also frequently see them near farms and cul-de-sacs and the wood lines along the roadways. They are all around people's homes. I often see sign not 50 feet from children's swing sets. Heartbreaking. I frequently travel Interstate 80/90. This highway traverses east and west across the whole U.S. Huge Sasquatch sign clusters are located not 10 minutes from Buffalo, New York. Even in Cleveland, Ohio city limits. Even Chicago. In other words, it's everywhere along one of the most heavily traveled highways in the world. And not just that highway. I see it everywhere, whether I want to or not. We have spent a lot of time in the southwest U.S. this past year, and yep, I've seen them and their habitat there too. It's extremely disturbing to me why they seek to cluster around human populations. As you pointed out, Steve, most of the world is wilderness. Why are they sneaking around our homes? Why are they skulking around seeking to torment us? These questions haunted me. Why are they scaring everyone? What do I do to get family to listen to this? These questions I took before the Lord, and he says, if we ask him for wisdom, we will not hold it back, but will lavish his wisdom upon us. I believe he takes pleasure in our questions. I took him at his word and seriously inquired after his knowledge. We began to unravel an ancient story that absolutely blew my mind. That's for another day. I'd just like to point out that while I've related some of my Sasquatch PTSD moments, and there are more, my life goes on in joy. I refuse to live in fear. I will continue to use the common sense the Lord has given us. I'm wise enough to know not to go where angels fear to tread. But as God is my help, I'm not caving into fear of the Sabbath or anything other than dark forces on this earth. As God is my helper, I won't do it. I'm not depressed. I'm healthy in heart and mind, thank God. But we are not living in the same world we lived in just a few short years ago. And God is certainly showing me the days are evil. But despite the evil that is in this world, I'm moving forward with great hope and joy for the future. I plan to live in this beautiful creation that God has made for his people. God gave man domination over the earth, not Sasquatch or evil entities. With your permission, I'd like to share some of my conclusions after a lengthy study, but first, more encounters in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, 2020 and 2021. To this day, I can no longer feel comfortable walking in the woods alone. I go in groups and we go armed. Again, I'm not living in fear, but I am not foolish or stupid about the caution I need to possess. Mushroom and berry picking I cannot do alone anymore. I think it would be foolhardy. I've had too many experiences with Sasquatch on my property to trust anything to do with them. It is clear they're stalking me. When my husband is home, I don't see them. I'll share more of these experiences now. My youngest daughter had just got engaged to a wonderful guy. Wedding plans were in the air. I knew I'd be having friends and family gather at our home in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. I was busy the whole year fixing up the house and gardens. I wanted everything to be special for her. All these plans were in the height of COVID, and to our heartbreak, she had to cancel her wedding twice. But I continued on with my projects nevertheless, hoping for a better day for her. She did get married in a small ceremony in New Jersey, and they are very happy. However, we are all heartbroken that our happiness once again had been diminished by the New World Order implementation of the COVID attack upon the world. And our personal world. At this time, I'd already had a very enlightened view of the Sabbath, as well as a very awakened view of the real stuff that's going on in our world. Happily, naivety and former thick-headedness had been exchanged for heightened awareness of my surroundings, and I had learned to possess an acute focus to that still small voice of God within. My knowledge of most everything was exploding. I was listening, I was observing, no brag, just fact. When one is actively, acutely, intuitively discerning, sorry you guys, you pick up on more than others who are not equipped to be intuitive or discerning. Not all of us possess the same gifts God has given to people. My husband has no clue of their existence around him. I do. He has looked at them with me and not seen them, and I see them. I've stopped being angry with him about it because he is not called to do this. I am. It is my burden to carry. But there's also a level of denial in people that is absolutely appalling. I certainly shouldn't condemn anyone else for that because I had the chronic habit of simply blocking out what I didn't comprehend, so I can't judge anybody. However, there comes a point where protecting your heart and mind with denial is just dumb. Anyway, here are more experiences on our New York property in the Finger Lakes region. I'd wake up to hear amplified voices and whispers under my second floor bedroom window at night. I think most of your seasoned Bigfoot veterans know that weird language is frequently reported as common Sabbath behavior, weird chattering, coupled with odd tones that are all over the musical scale. What troubles me is they know I'm sleeping and where. They have observed me enough to know, I repeat, know where I am sleeping. They whisper so I don't wake up. I find that completely disturbing. It's evil behavior. During afternoons at my place, I often enjoy working in my garden. I was determined to finish a lengthy new garden bed along my driveway. In hopeful preparation for future wedding celebration and visitors, there are woods on our neighbor's property located immediately on the other side of it. Keeping my head on a swivel, I enjoy planting, weeding, and raking, etc. I was glad to have some steel garden tools around to wield if I needed to defend myself. I would create a bunch of noise with my husband's garden tractor, helping to deter any interest in me by the savvy. Unfortunately, it didn't deter them. It seems two of them were constantly on duty to watch the house. I don't know how else to think about it. I'm being surveilled by those things. I hate them. I really do. They seek to rob me of my garden produce, my safety, and my peace, and I don't want them near me. I was on my knees, happily, quietly working in my garden, when I heard a large branch snap on the floor of the woods about 15 feet ahead of me. I immediately looked to my left to see a stone flying laterally across the open area until it hit a little bird on the branch in front of me. I couldn't believe my eyes. The bird screeched in pain and flew off. I was glad it lived. I cannot explain how an animal can throw a stone. That is not animal behavior. Animals don't throw anything, but a Sasquatch would. My family had experienced stone throwing in the Sequoia National Forest, as I related earlier. We don't have kids on our road. Even if we did, nobody goes in there. No human was out there but me. I had to pack up my gear, and go inside. I figured I'd be getting the stones thrown at me next. I never saw it / them. No smell, no sounds. Thank God. I related to you in an earlier encounter that I had suspected that the Sasquatch were eating the kitchen scraps I would throw into the woods. I practiced at tossing food scraps into the woods to biodegrade. Stopped. I bought a composting barrel that sits on a frame off the ground. I moved it toward my husband's burn pile, thinking the smell of the ash and soot would deter visitors. There's a little hatch in the side of the barrel. You twist open, dump your scraps inside, and screw on the hatch again. Then you can rotate the barrel to mix it up. The scraps keep coming up missing. I'd find the lid on the ground, unscrewed on the ground. Sometimes the lid was screwed back on, but no scrapes inside the barrel, empty. I asked my husband if he, perhaps, had used them. He said no. There is nothing strewn on the ground nearby. Another time I put food scraps and yard debris inside it. Came back to find it open. Only the food scraps are gone. Fussy eaters. Has anybody else had Sasquatch open their composter? I know bear can get into almost anything if they want to, but I think I would have heard them knocking the composter barrel around. But bear cannot screw the lid back on. No claw marks. Sometime later in the summer, I was on our mowing near our property line. I've been cleaning up our shrubs around the house, pushing back the borders of more dense forested areas. Here's hoping it gives me a fighting chance to distance myself from these things. I pulled the mower alongside the edge of the fence, bordering our property. I saw a large reddish stump that had never been there before. By this time, I'd already had the red tree stump encounter, and the memory of that experience returned to me. I needed my complete concentration on mowing and was determined to not let, anything disturb my peace. When I made the next pass, my stump looked like it moved. I looked for a rational reason why a movable redwood tree stump would suddenly appear in a place I see every day. I couldn't find any reasoning for that. On the next pass, I turned a 90-degree corner around it to ride down a path about 20 feet from it. Then I was going to get off my mower and go over and see what it was. As I passed, I looked over and I saw a huge eye, about 15 feet away, a bush between us. I knew what I was looking at. No eye that size is found on any other native animals in the Northeast. Another head popped out from behind it. Both had the same long, stringy red hair like I had seen before. When I got past the bush between us, I looked back again and it was gone. No eye, no reddish tree stump, nothing. Literally disappeared. Once again, we made eye contact. They were terrified. I related to you before that they react to me like that. That's a good thing. I believe they had sat there for the hours as I worked outside and watched me. I'm so sick of this. These Sasquatch have a Frankenstein-shaped head. I kid you not. Tufts of red hair strand out from its ears, chin, and the top of its head. Reddish skin, but short hair on the face. I have to say that eye was quite beautiful. Brown/red/amber. Both female and juvenile are hanging around together. Their demeanor is not so much menacing as mocking, cynical, and sneaky. And like you have said to our listeners, Steve, if they wanted my ass, they would have it by now. In fall 2021, I worked up the courage to go outside again, the 50 feet out my back door, to put kitchen scraps into my composter. Not 10 feet from me, behind two trees, I could see long, reddish, stringy hair blowing in the wind on either side of the trees. Audible whispers. One about 10 feet tall, the other 12 feet. The juvenile was getting bigger. I just turned around and hustled my way back up to the house. When I looked back, no hair blowing on either side of the tree trunks. Gone. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. I'm not lying. Intermixed with the above encounters in New York, I have repeatedly found dead birds at my doors. I learned from your listeners this is a common occurrence with Sasquatch. Also, a flower will be placed at my door, or feathers. 3 times I have seen that. I shoveled off a dead bird only to find it there again the next day. I see this at my front door and back door. I am presuming, from the education I'm getting from you and your listeners, it is possible that they view the table scraps as a gift. I never was interested in feeding or gifting Bigfoot anything. I have ceased the practice of putting anything edible in my woods. On 2 occasions, 2019, 2020, I was sitting in the lower level of our home watching TV near a window. I enjoy watching the deer feed in the backyard in the evening, and other small animals that traverse our house on their own evening schedules. On 2 occasions after dark, I detected coyote milling around my back door. That's usually not their behavior. They usually keep the distance from humans. All kinds of noise, yelping, barking non-stop, 8 to 12 of them. I was horrified. Were they after me? The coy-wolf that are now part of their packs and dominate the coyote here have been known to take down people on trails in our area. I witnessed on 2 separate occasions the coyote have run into the glass door and bounced off. I hear a thunk. At first I thought they must be trying to get through the window and at me curled up on the couch. Just on the other side of the window, they just didn't perceive the glass. Being a little wiser now, thanks to you and your listeners, I think the Sasquatch had cornered the coyote on our patio outside our window. The Bigfoot were hunting them down, and the coyote were trying to escape. The coyote were trying to escape through the window into my house. I think the Sasquatch were grabbing them. The coyote would scream in pain and then quiet. It was always quite a scramble, knocking my garden post over and making all kinds of racket. Again, twice I experienced that. Later, my son-in-law also had the same experience, sitting on the same couch in the same place, same window. I may have seen blood spots later in that location once, but I cannot be sure. I saw large dark shadows moving out there, but it was difficult to ascertain all the facts in the dark. Have any of your listeners ever encountered this kind of experience? That is, Sabe using entrapment to hunt. That shows a level of intelligence that reflects their human DNA, in my opinion. There was no gunshots. I can't believe it was hunters. People do not hunt and trap coyote in New York, but only in winter, and not on our property and never at my window. There are no animals that are predators to the coyote here. Bear could take them, but they didn't. They don't. That's not bear behavior. They might fight over food, but bear don't corner coyote like that. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I just can't compute why coyote are milling around my patio door with their attention looking outward from me. Their backs are towards me. I believe the coyote are screaming and crying because they are the prey. They are being pursued. So who's the hunter? Only Sasquatch as I see it. At this time, there are no coyote around anymore. None. No howls, barking, whining anywhere. They are gone. Guess who's at the top of the food chain now? Disease amongst these packs could be an answer to their decline and absence, but my gut tells me it is the Sasquatch who feed on the coyote population. My husband has lighted up the back 2 levels of my house with party lights, hopefully deterrent. I just want to be in peace in the privacy of my family room at night. These Sasquatch are, at the very least, annoying and are mostly evil, and I'm so sick of them. Encounters in the worst year of my life, 2021. Most people I know call 2021 the worst year of their life. I agree. My daughter had to cancel her wedding celebration for the second time. The COVID debacle was ongoing and tyrannical. Restrictions were becoming more draconian as the deep state pushed its New World Order upon us. My dear 87-year-old mother was threatened with hospitalization twice. You do not want your elderly family in the hospital now. The other big stressor. Our family became divided over the whole political issues in our face. Heated discussions ended in great pain and sorrow for me and my husband. We had a short reprieve of the stresses that year. We traveled to California to attend my nephew's wedding. It was lovely. We had so much fun, we really rested. On July 1st, 2021, I returned home from our great vacation, first before my husband, to find my beautiful New York dream home engulfed in smoke. I could not even see my lower level from the top of the stairs. It was black with smoke. Our wonderful community volunteer fire department and sheriffs responded in less than 5 minutes. The source of the smoke was determined to be our custom boiler exhaust fan in our basement. Believe it or not, a squirrel lodged itself into the fan box, ironically called the squirrel cage, and prevented the fan from rotating the exhaust. All the smoke backed up into the house, all 4 floors, for at least 2 weeks. Not one hardwired smoke detector went off to alert the neighborhood. Not one. The fire department sealed the house up and deemed it uninhabitable. I'd just become a homeless person. A difficult year just got harder, especially since I had just finished remodeling 7 rooms in my house the year before. I'm grateful to God that we were not hurt. No one was. We spent the next 3 months living in a hotel. I'll travel back to our home almost every day to work with the mitigation and restoration company sent by our insurance company. One would think that with all the action of the many people and construction vehicles at our property, the Sasquatch moved off. Most animals did that, but not them. It was a big sideshow for them. I could hear these Sasquatch day and night chattering, whispering, watching, and observing all the action. The many workers who moved all the damaged goods and debris out of our home also quizzed me on what I had in my woods. On 2 occasions after the work crews would leave the house, I would get my bag lunch out and have my meal at the picnic table. I could at least enjoy my deck and the beautiful outdoors that I love. Twice I would hear breaking limbs. It was a year for walnuts, and I wrote it off at first as heavy limbs. In case people didn't know, the walnuts are encased in a heavy shell. The heavy walnuts at harvest do fall off the trees, but I had not seen branches breaking off before, even from the walnut's weight, but I guess it's possible. When it happened the next day, same place, same time, I just about cried. On top of everything, I had to endure the Sasquatch breaking tree limbs in front of me, about 300 feet away. Next, I see another tree start to crack and fall. A huge limb broke away and crashed into the ravine at the back of our yard. The heavy walnut-laden limb theory began to dissolve. Then I heard whooping noises. The whoop, 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 followed by huffing, puffing, and snorts. I had my eyes trained to the backyard wood line. At the same time I heard all the whoops, I saw extraordinarily long, hairy, reddish arms flailing in circles above its head as if to rotate vertically around the shoulders. Stomp, 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 stomp as it moved away from the crashed tree limb. The first couple stomps literally vibrated across the picnic table I was sitting at. Next, the chatter started, the weird language, utterances as if 2 of them were arguing. That's not the first time I'd heard that kind of verbal dialogue between Bigfoot. I'd heard it in California, Texas, and here, and then it was over. Nothing there, no sound. I put my head in my hands and sat there praying for a minute. On top of everything else, I had to endure these things. I was exhausted to the innermost core of my being. I didn't need to experience any evil Bigfoot around me to torment us anymore. I asked God to get these things out of my life. I tossed my bag lunch into the trash and left. If the experience wasn't so weird, discerning, it would be funny. Disconcerting, it would be funny. I think the Sasquatch were in the trees, so they could see all the action at the house a little better. One of them was too heavy for the limb. It broke under them. That's my conclusion. But of course, we'll never know. Also, they could have broken the limbs to try to communicate something, whatever, to me. Who knows? Seeing as the Bigfoot don't pay the mortgage, they don't get to tell me they don't like my presence when I'm not at my own house. Okay, this is getting crazy long. Holy doodles. I'm getting talked out. I think it's the first. Holy cow. Okay, as of this writing, July 2022, our home is about 3/4 restored now. Most of the insurance money has thankfully come through. New floors are down, painting is done, some new furniture and appliances. 2 of the floors feel just like home again. We still have a lot to do, but it's coming along just fine. The next part of this story is almost unbelievable, but I swear before God it is true. A month to the day after we called the fire department at our home, the fire department was called to our neighbor's home across the street. Just like us, these good people came home from a vacation to find their home engulfed in sooty smoke. They too were forced out of their home. He is an avid hunter. Lithium batteries in his portable air purifier, deodorizing his hunting gear, caught fire, smoldering the whole time they were gone. You would appreciate Steve. He was most concerned about his taxidermy. He was able to save his personal lifelong worldwide collection, and no one was injured in the incident either, thank God. Then 3 months later, incredibly, another neighbor across the street from us had a house fire, soot and fire damage so catastrophic they must tear down their home. Also not arson, but natural, explainable causes for their fire. We're heartbroken again. I'm researching a mysterious explosion about a mile from all of us in our neighborhood. Prior to our fires, an explosion near a gas line rocked our town. A massive hole appeared next to the pipe no one can explain. Rods of God, I wonder. It made the MSN news, soon swept under the rug, and everybody moved on. I hesitate sharing this because I don't have all the facts, but circumstantially, now, how can I just dismiss this as unrelated to these extraordinary experiences? I can't. There are no coincidences. There is something fishy going on here. Let me repeat, 4 fires on the same road, all have catastrophic damage in the same 5-month period of time. Same fire department responded to all 4 fire calls. They have never seen anything like it. All of us are flag-waving Second Amendment proponents. At least 2 families are firm believers in God and practice their faith. No small amount of prayer is offered to God to deliver us from evil. We reside in one of the 13 counties in New York State whose sheriffs refused to enforce the government's vax travel mandates. Refused. I'm so proud of them. They are the strong contingency of conservatives in this era who don't want this unconstitutional deep state BS. All the while, we're sitting on top of the tunnel systems under us in the Finger Lake region that are being cleared of contraband and child trafficking networks, according to the many military and patriot news sources I follow. They include Gene D. Code, Michael J. Code, the U.S. Military News, Restored Republic. Each one has reported on these efforts to get New World Order activities destroyed. Is that the mysterious explosion down the road? They have both stated that troops were lost in an explosion while attempting to rescue children. I'm trying to find out more about that as time permits. By the way, Michael J. Code and Gene D. Code have both acknowledged the existence of Sabe dogmen and other entities that are being used in missions by our military and others. They know they are here. Do your own research. What do any of your listeners know about this? Oh boy, I don't know if I can do much. Okay, I'm almost there. Almost there. We don't fight against flesh and blood, contending with physical opponents, but against the despotisms, against the powers, against the master spirits who are the world rulers of this present darkness, against the spirit forces of wickedness in the heavenly supernatural realm. There are so many good people fighting the evil around us. I believe these home losses, the draining, exhausting work involved, the wrestling with insurance companies, becoming homeless, and forced to deal with the Sabe, and great burdens on good people. These are assaults, spiritual and physical assaults on us and our good service-minded neighbors. We're at war. If anyone thinks all these events / experiences are coincidences, or that we are simply unlucky or losers, you need to wake the hell up. My husband connected with my neighbor in January at our mailbox. Dust in here. They exchanged well wishes and prayers for each other and caught up on how we are recovering. In their brief conversation, they spoke out loud about the Bigfoot. He has had many encounters as well. We have committed to gathering together soon to discuss what we know, my neighbor has said. There are a lot of very weird things going on around here. I couldn't agree more. One day I was so fed up with the stalking, the crazy crap that they were doing around my place, I went to the edge of the woods and I said this. I rebuke you in the name of the Creator. God gave man / humans dominion over the earth, not you. I don't want you here. I don't want to see you, hear you, or smell you. I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to stop throwing stones at me. Stop coming anywhere near this county. I command you in the authority that God has given me to go back to your cave and stay there. If you don't know where to go ask Jesus and he will help you know where to go. I proclaim the peace of God over this county. I also ask the Lord God, the Creator, to send his good angels to help us keep these entities away from us. As it stands now, we have been free of these things. I'd done that the same in Texas at a property there, and was free of them. Now I know these entities will try to defy that in return. They always try. But I, for one, am committed to drawing strength and power from God to deal with this abbey and these devastating events. Some of your listeners will understand what I have done. I covet the prayers of others, and I am praying for them too. Did it. I read it. That is the longest email we've ever had sent in to date. There's a lot of things in there, and that is one hell of a thing to make up and put onto paper. And sit down and type it out and send our way. And oh man, I am done. That one just sucked the life out of me. Not the story, the contents, just the length of it. Holy doodles. If any of you aren't sick of my voice by now. That was one hell of a read, isn't it? There was a lot in there. Wow. That's all I can say is wow to that one. Take from it what you will or leave it. I gotta get going. I am now officially late. I'll talk to everybody shortly.